If you've played Smite before, then you've no doubt experienced toxicity. This is a problem not unique to Smite. A lot of multiplayer video games are going to have their fair share of toxicity, and Smite is unfortunately one of them. So I'm going to go over a bunch of different ways that you personally can deal with toxicity in Smite so that you and your teammates have a better experience. Now, there are plenty right and wrong ways to combat toxicity in Smite. One of the worst things you can do when trying to deal with toxicity in Smite is arguing back. I know it's very tempting, trust me, I've done it before. I'm not proud of it, but I have done it before, but I strongly encourage you to not give in to the urge to argue back with people.
Stop the violence.
The reason is that it'll just make you and the other player more angry. And then the other three teammates on your team are going to have a lower morale because the team isn't getting along. And when your team can't get along, you can't fight as a team. So you're going to end up losing the match. 9 times out of 10, when people are arguing on my team, we always end up losing the match because we can't strategize, we can't respect each other, and we can't play as a team. Also, if you're fighting back, you could end up saying stuff that's against the community guidelines that you don't even realize are against the community guidelines. You know what your mom always said? If you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything. Another way of dealing with toxicity that I would completely avoid would be quitting the match. Now, I can sympathize if your entire team is bullying you and you really just can't take it anymore. If you feel like you just cannot be in this match anymore, absolutely turn it off. It is a game after all, and you're there to have fun. You're there to have a competitive experience. You're not there to get bullied. But there are a lot of negatives involved when it comes to quitting the match. One of the consequences of quitting a match will be you will get a deserter's penalty. That means the next time you log in, depending on how many times you have quit a match, you will not be able to queue for another match until that's over. You also lose goodwill. Eventually you'll end up being placed in really bad queues, and you don't want that. Another reason why quitting the match is not something I would recommend is that it screws over the teammates on your team that weren't being toxic. There's 5 of you on each team. If you leave, the 3 people that weren't engaging in any sort of toxicity, they just lost their match because people were arguing and you decided to leave them shorthanded, which is very unfortunate because a lot of people who play this game are adults who might not get the chance to play this game very often, especially if you're in a conquest game. A lot of people have kids, full-time jobs, they go to school full-time, and they don't have a lot of time to play the game that they really love. I know when I was working full-time and going to school full-time, every time I would queue into a match and I ended up having somebody leave the match, I would get very frustrated because it was the one match that I was going to have time to play that day, and it was going to end quickly and in a very annoying fashion. And yes, there are a lot of wrong ways that you can deal with toxicity, so I'm going to tell you some of the right ways that you can deal with toxicity in Smite. Number 1, there is a report function. So in the game, after a match, you're shown your results screen, and there is an exclamation point next to each user's name. If you click on that exclamation point and you press report player, it'll bring up the option to select why you're reporting them. Maybe it's harassment, maybe it's threats, maybe it's bullying, maybe it's because they left the game, maybe it's because they intentionally fed. You get the deal. You have the option to describe exactly what happened, which is helpful to the team when they're trying to assess the situation. There's nothing better than logging into Smite and seeing an action has been taken against a player you reported. Another thing that you can do, in my opinion, this is the best thing that you can do, is muting the player that is being toxic. If you don't know how to mute people, just pull up the scoreboard and go to the god who's being toxic to you. Press the speaker button, and then if you click on it, it will mute the player. And then you don't have to hear from them. Now, you might be asking, what if the player says something like, attack the fire giant, and you didn't hear that because you muted them? There's an option where you can either just mute chat messages, or you can mute both chat messages and VGS. That comes in handy if someone is spamming the classic, "You rock, cancel that." It gets very annoying very quickly. So that can come in handy, especially if the toxic person is spamming VGS. Sometimes, personally, I like keeping it on just in case the person makes a good call. I don't want to miss it. But I have a little insider information. 9 times out of 10, if somebody is being toxic, it's extremely safe to just mute them because they're not going to provide anything of value. Because if they were trying to win the match, they would not start bullying their teammate. My last tip, I don't want to say this because it is frustrating that people are not nice to new players, but it is pretty much a fact that if you play well, if you learn the game, if you know your role, you won't get as much toxicity. No one should be toxic, period. You should always remember that these are other people on the other side of these keyboards. These gods on your team are being controlled by real people. Toxicity is never okay. Toxicity is never justified. But since you can't really control other people, being good at the game so that people don't really have anything bad to say about you is one good way that you can limit toxicity. I cannot stress enough how annoying it is for me to have to give this as a point, because new players and bad players should be able to play the game. It's a free-to-play game, and we're playing this game overall because we want to have fun. And I do not believe that it's constructive to be toxic at any time, especially towards new players, especially towards people who are trying to learn. Like I said, you can't control everybody, unfortunately, so it would be a good way to help avoid some toxicity. And also, you'll have a better time at the game if you're really trying to be serious about the game. You're going to have a better time if you learn to play. So I suggest watching content creators on YouTube, Twitch streamers on Twitch, and just try to join a Smite community and just talk about the game, ask questions about the game, try to get to know the game better, and I think you'll have a wonderful time, because the benefits to actually learning the game, they're more than just avoiding toxicity. The benefits of learning the game are that you get to try out fun builds that will make sense to you. You get to play the game and have fun. Once you know the rules, you know how to break the rules. It's a really fun game with rewarding mechanics, and it's always going to be worth it to learn the game. All right. Those are my tips for avoiding toxicity in Smite. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. Also, give me a little thumbs up. Give me a comment on your best ways to avoid toxicity in Smite. And feel free to join my Discord. I like to cultivate a Smite community full of positivity and kindness. This has been Rose Pop. Have a good day, y'all. Not the deicide. Girl, how did you know where I was gonna spawn? How did you hit me with the hammer as soon as I spawned?